All right. Let's get fired up here.
Maximum freedom. Read.
Stay on target.
Maximum freedom.
Stay on target.
Maximum freedom. Read Rothbard.
Hello and welcome to this very special President's Day special of the Actual Anarchy podcast, brought to you by the fine folks at readrothbard.com. We also run actualanarchy.com, where we highlight this podcast, which is about movies from a Rothbardian Anarcho-Capitalist perspective. We also host a bunch of different articles written by contributing authors, most of them found in the Tom Woods Elite Facebook group. So if you aren't a fan of Tom Woods just yet, go to tomwoods.com, check it out. And if you enjoy what he does, get into the Facebook group by being a supporting listener for him. Like I said, you can find us at actualanarchy.com, and this President's Day special is going to be about the film Lincoln, not the Vampire Slayer one, which is probably a better film in my opinion. But Robert, how you doing, man? My co-host is here with me. How are you doing?
Thanks, Connie. Yeah, what's up, Freedom Nerds? This special shouldn't exist. It's taking place for President's Day, which shouldn't exist, and hopefully in my lifetime it won't exist, but here we are doing it. Saw the movie back in theaters, and I wasn't able to get to it here, but I know you guys have just seen it recently, so you'll be able to carry this one. Anyway, yeah, having a good time, loving life. Let's do this.
Yeah, and you kind of tipped our hand a little bit by saying you guys, because we have a special guest with us. His name is Rex Gazer, and he is a 20-year-old anarcho-capitalist. I can't believe that somebody that young, such an advantage to be an ANCAP already. It took me until I was almost 35, so that's pretty amazing. He is going to be writing for us at actualanarchy.com and working on his own blog, which will be called For a Millennial Liberty. That's a working title, so don't stick him to that. Just let it be known that we will be hosting his stuff and linking out to whatever the eventual actual title is going to be. But how you doing, Rex? Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, I'm doing great, guys. I don't know how much an advantage. It certainly is liberating, so to speak, and it does allow you to think better as far as being an anarchist at 20. Seems. But no, I mean, I've a little bit about me though. I've been a libertarian basically as long as I've been political, which I started really getting interested at like the age of 12. Started reading my first economic stuff at 14. Started with Road to Serfdom by F.A. Hayek. And I'm working currently on the treatise by Murray Rothbard. Why am I struggling? Wow.
Man, Economy, and State.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, great way to start the show for getting like Murray Rothbard's giant informative work. Woohoo! Anyway, yeah, but
just so the audience knows, we've been on a pre-show call with you for about 15 or 20 minutes, and you've been like blowing us away, and then we hit record, and here we are. And we were also talking in the pre-show about a little bit about what I do. I'm currently a military member in a reserve status, so just for the legalities of it, like, this is my opinion. Everything we're talking about is my opinion, nobody else's. I know a lot of the Rothbardian listeners are going to be like, well, how can you be in the military and Rothbardian? Well, there is a giant medical service aspect that happens, and I'm certainly a contributor to that. Because the thing we have to keep in mind is there's these 18, 19-year-old, 20-year-old kids who, sign up for these things and these wars, and they're put in harm's way, and I don't think we have enough sympathy for them, right? I mean, they're victims of a system. They're not they themselves
like fully. I'm not saying they're free of guilt or anything. I'm not saying they're like, they're right to want to go to war. I'm just saying at the same time they're young, and this offers advantages for them, like that are undeniable, right? Like education being one of the biggest things. And I plan to write more about that for the website, so I won't really dwell on that. I just wanted to throw that out there for people, just so we have full disclosure about me as an anarchist. So,
very good. Now, you say you've been a libertarian since you were 12?
I mean, as long as I've been political, so yeah. Like, I was born into the movement. Like, I mean, I was raised by a libertarian, so yeah.
Okay, so, I mean, you've been getting into economics, though, since you were, like, that old.
14,
I was playing Nintendo at that age, so...
I'm doing that, too.
What possesses, like, a 12-year-old to pick up an economics book?
I mean, so, again, 14, so I was in high school. Like, let's not give me too much credit. And, I mean, like, Road to Surface is a fairly easy read, and it still took me forever to read it. And I'm still pretty slow in reading. I've mostly been reading internet articles from there on out, and that's why there's only, like, 2 books I'm really talking about right now. I mean, and then I still haven't even delved into, like, the philosophy works. It's mostly been the economic works. So, like, I think after I get done with Man, Economy, and State, is either going to be Hans Hermann Hoppe's Democracy, the God That Failed, or For a New Liberty by Rothbard. But that one's massive, so I might put that off. So,
Okay. And you plan on staying in the military? What's your plan there?
That is a evolving situation for multiple reasons. On the one hand, I think it's really, really important for the perspective side. Like, I think that we undervalue just how much we don't understand about things like foreign policy, like in a direct sense, not talking about in the general philosophy sense. Obviously, I'm a non-interventionist in nature, but like there's things about foreign policy you can gain from being in the military once you strip away some of the noise, right? Like the impact it has on the military. Like the military is not always so pro these engagements. The rank and file people, the apolitical people, they often have a less pro-war tendency, especially once you strip away the myths about, who are fighting. So, there's a lot of value in being there and like having that perspective.
I've always had the argument that it's sort of akin to what's been happening with the black population in the country, where they take away the economic opportunities with minimum wage laws and license laws, and then having the war on poverty and the war on drugs. So it sort of removes all of their more legitimate options. And I can envision that being an enticement for people to join the military because a lot of their other options aren't available to them any longer.
I definitely think there's some truth to that for sure. I definitely joined for economic reasons initially. But, I mean, there definitely was an element in which, I mean, when I picked what I was doing, it was very motivated by wanting to help people. I turned down certain bonuses for doing more jobs more directly related to the war effort, more so for the fact that I wanted to help people in a real kind of way, So, yeah, I definitely sympathize with that argument. I also think, too, that, like, the school system, like, the way our recruiting tactics, stuff like that definitely play an impact. Like, I remember at 17, there was a recruiter in a mall trying to walk up to one of my buddies and trying to, like, talking a good game about the Marine Corps, and I got kind of mad. So, there's definitely aspects of that.
Yeah, we've got a little fun story about that. So when Robert and I were young, and we're not so young anymore, but that son of a bitch sicked a Navy recruiter on me, gave him my phone number, and that guy would call me a couple times a week.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. No, it's true. And I mean, by the way, and this is going to sound more, I guess it's going to sound more sacrilegious to a lot of y'all, but I mean, I don't even view like everything about that as bad, right? Like, I mean, I think especially when libertarians acknowledge the fact that we pay taxes and stuff because we're like in the system that we're set to be in, right? There is a legitimate argument in trying to better yourself the best way you can, and sometimes, the military is a legitimate option. I'm not talking about like infantry or anything. I'm just talking about in a general sense.
How do you feel about the argument that you're essentially being paid with stolen money? Because that was one of the things that I struggled with when I was potentially pursuing a job in government at a school district. And that was the argument Daniel threw at me. And it was an argument that I threw at myself. and I struggled with it. How are you dealing with that?
I mean, really simply that money is going to be stolen regardless, and is going to go to somebody else who's going to go to me. So, and I mean, I'm not trying to use. It's not like I'm trying to take more of that money than is what is entitled to my position, right? So, I take issue with that kind of thinking mostly because you're talking about doing a legitimate service like a teacher, right? I'm talking about doing a medical job in the reserves. We're not talking about becoming a congressman, right? And then voting up my own salary every year, and then on top of that taking an illegal pension scheme, and at the same time draining Social Security. You know what I'm saying? There has to be some limitations on how we view this. Otherwise, your tax rebate. Why should you get that? Blah blah blah. You know what I'm saying? It's a rabbit hole that kind of keeps going for me. So I just stopped really caring about it.
Okay. Because you would argue that you are providing a desirable service.
Yes, I am. I mean, I'm in the medical profession, right? So I see patients and help doctors, deal with their workload. There's legitimacy to that service, and I don't see why we have to demonize it just because the money is coming from government. When realistically, I would vote. I wouldn't vote against. I would vote against my own salary if I could, right? It's not like that. It's just kind of the reality of where I'm at, in my life. So I have to still operate according to my own interests.
Now, are you going into this with the intention of going to school later, or are you getting skills that would allow you to get a job in the private sector afterwards?
I'm planning to go to school. I'm actually planning to study economics at school too. That's the game plan right now. I got a couple colleges I'm looking at. I'm really excited because one of them's Hillsdale College, and they have the Mises Library there. If you didn't know that, that's really cool. I got to check that out when I went and visited. It's a cool joint, man. It's awesome.
Cool.
Walter Block's always recruiting. If you want to go down to Loino.
I would be interested. I don't think he'd be very happy with my academic performance, but we'll see. I mean, Hillsdale's taking me because of the military, which is another thing. I hate to be like this, but there is some advantages to taking what's there for us to use. Not universally. Again, I'm doing this from an apolitical perspective, right? When I looked at the military, I basically looked at it as an apolitical decision, because it was motivated by me wanting to help my friends and then, better my life, better myself too. So I think that's important to keep in mind.
All right.
Yeah, well, we should probably get around to talking about this movie. What do you guys think?
I was just about to say, we didn't call to interview me. We called to talk about a movie.
So, like I was saying in the beginning, this is a President's Day special, and we are talking about it from an actual anarchy, Rothbardian Anarcho-Capitalist perspective. So, as one can imagine, we probably aren't too keen on the film, though. Yeah. I think Rex, you were IMing with me a couple days ago that said you kind of liked the movie and you liked the performance by Daniel Day-Lewis. But you watched it rather recently, or at least parts of it recently. You want to give us a little bit of a rundown on it, or do you want me to do that part? We're totally open.
I can give the short rundown. Yeah. So basically, the film covers the last 4 months of Lincoln's life and presidency, and in that period, you have the most significant event being the passing of the 13th Amendment of the Constitution, which, of course, abolished slavery in the United States, which I had forgotten, with exception to forfeiture of your rights via conviction, which we might want to talk about later. But, it talks about the film mostly focuses on Lincoln's drive to end slavery. If I had to say there was any one thing about the film, it was talking about how Lincoln wants to end slavery by any means necessary. And that's kind of the film, in a nutshell, before we get into specifics.
And how accurate is that perspective?
Oh, in real life? Okay, so it depends on what you mean. So it's accurate in the sense of, yes, he did these things. It's less accurate in, his own attitude, I would think.
Right, he was a unionist first and foremost.
I'm sorry?
He was a unionist first and foremost.
Yes, that's true. No, he was. No, and I mean, and they portray that in the film. That's the other thing too. They portray he's a unionist. They just don't. They kind of like mix up how much of a unionist he is. Although I still think they did a pretty good job of portraying it. I mean, he referred to them as rebels multiple times. He refused to acknowledge them as a sovereign nation. They did that in the film. They had his opponents point out the fact he's arrested the press, suspended habeus corpus. Like, a lot of the Lincoln, problems are on display in this movie. Pretty full, bold-faced. They just, equally heap on virtue signaling.
Yeah, I would say that any criticisms of Lincoln, of which there are many legitimate ones, but they had this virulent racist be the person who said those things, and so they're automatically tainted. They're poisoning the well. And saying, well, he just hates Lincoln because he's a racist, and so he's just bad-mouthing him.
Well, yeah, but then you have to remember, too, is that, his cabinet even, there's a scene where Lincoln is sitting there with his cabinet, and they find out about the fact that he basically made the deal to send the head, basically the money half of the conservative right-wingers caucus down to Charleston to get the delegation to come to talk peace. And, he's like, the Lincoln who does this is in reference to the 13th Amendment and how it threatens the peace treaty, right? The Lincoln who does this is, basically what the papers have been talking about, the dictator, our king. And, so, I mean, there's a lot more challenging in the film than I thought there would be, or than I remembered. But that doesn't negate the fact. Oh, go ahead.
Well, yeah, it seemed like they tried to bake in some nuance with this plot device of that they were already winning the war, but he wanted this 13th Amendment in there to make sure that, even if the South were defeated, that slavery would actually be abolished. But I don't think that is a true thing. I mean, DiLorenzo has many books on this. Yeah. He's got the two Lincoln books specifically, but plenty of talks as well, where Lincoln basically said, I don't care two whits about slavery as long as I can keep the Union together.
Well, and I do agree with that. I agree with that analysis. I think the thing the film, I don't know actually how accurate or inaccurate this is, but the entire fight around the 13th Amendment in that film, I felt like was a way for Lincoln, and this is just my analysis, was a way for Lincoln to not have to negotiate peace with the South. Right? I felt that was the entire purpose. Because the whole purpose of negotiating peace, that was what a lot of people were pushing for, was to allow the South to be their own country and leave them alone. Right? Which Lincoln wanted no part of. So the 13th Amendment allowed him this ability to tick off the South, right? Make them not want to come to the table, make them not want to be repatriated because he would take away their slaves. So it gave him what? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it gives him an excuse to keep the war going.
Yeah, absolutely. So it gives him all the power he needs to not just get to the point where the South surrenders, but then to bring them back into the United States, basically without having to give up any of his positions or legacy, actually.
Right.
So yeah, and that legacy is still holding true to this day. I mean, he's probably the most revered president of all of them, right?
I would say so. The only one who comes close I can think off the top of my head is FDR, probably.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, even the back sleeve of the DVD, which I normally watch things on streaming, but they wanted $20 from me for this thing, and I said no.
What are you using? Amazon Prime, my friend. Amazon Prime.
Yeah, it is Amazon Prime, the video service, which if you click on one of the links on Actual Anarchy or readrothbard.com, we'll get a little bit of a compensation. So look out for that, folks. Click on that stuff for us. But, yeah, the back of this thing says, this inspiring and revealing drama focuses on the 16th president's tumultuous final 4 months in office as this visionary leader pursues a course of action to end the Civil War. They don't even talk about how he started it. Unite the country and abolish slavery. And it goes on to say, Lincoln sheds light on a man of moral courage and fierce determination. Rolling Stone calls it a great American movie. Roger Ebert, 4 stars, and the New York Times, a masterpiece.
So, for all it's worth, I do think Daniel Day-Lewis did an excellent actor's job, right? Like, removing our political analysis, I thought he was a great actor in that movie, but that was just me. So, that was all I was talking about earlier. I definitely find their use of the word visionary as interesting. I mean, the only vision I can see is the vision of Hamilton and the vision of Henry Clay, both of which I don't find particularly revolutionary or radical. Just, yeah, I'm not sure how they got visionary out of that, I guess.
Well, they're of course referring to seeing beyond race and wanting to end slavery, but I
forget these things.
Yeah, I think in your perspective, you'd call him a paleo-fascist, right?
Why does the word paleo need to be there? I mean,
well, it's sort of before the Mussolini-style fascism that most people are familiar with.
I apologize. I was just thinking full blown. I was like, why is the word paleo? No, absolutely. No, I agree. I mean, I think the most impressive thing to me about it was, like, they would have scenes where they were discussing this, and then they would be in the cabinet room talking about the war, and they would talk about their plan to attack the fort, the seaport near Williamsport, right? That was the place I'm thinking.
Or Wilmington, right? I think.
Wilmington, yeah. And they were talking about how many shells they were going to use per minute. It was like the largest fleet they had assembled ever. And it was like they were going to be shelling them with something like 100 shells a minute or whatever. And I was sitting here like, you're talking about shelling a town, not a fort. Like, I mean, a fort and then a town after it, right? Because they were going to make the fort fall, and then they were going to try to get the town after. And I was just thinking, I don't know, like, it was just weird. And then when they didn't get peace later, they showed that they cut to the scene of the buildings burning. I mean, I don't know. I just had a giant flashback to all the stuff I had ever read about Sherman's March to the Sea. It was just bizarre.
Sherman just had a whole swath of just utter destruction and devastation, right? He leveled everything.
Yeah, he did. And I guess what I'm trying to get at is, like, I could not believe how successfully they were in, like, romanticizing basically the authorization to wipe out whole segments of American populations in that scene. I don't know. That was one of the big standouts to me too.
Yeah. So I sent Robert some notes as I was watching the film, and you know, just to set up the premise for this, I was watching it and my 2 kids were asleep in the other room, and so I had to have the volume way down, so I couldn't hear the John Williams score. I couldn't really hear any of the performances. So it was sort of like, and Rex, you might not even be familiar with this, but back in the old days, when I would go on flights for work, they would have these big CRT television screens in the aisle of the airplane. They'd have like 4 or 5 of them down the whole aisle, and they would play movies to watch, and you'd be able to plug in a 2-pronged headset to be able to listen to them, and sometimes you had to pay like $5 for the headset. Well, I was cheap, and I am cheap. I'm still cheap. So I didn't buy the headsets. And so I would occasionally, you know, during this boring flight, if I had brought a book and wanted to look up and look at a movie, I would see it but not hear it. And it always made it a detached reality for me. Like, it made it, like, less realistic in a way, like less believable. It looked more fake on the screen without all the ambiance and the audio. Well, this film, because I had to watch it that way, it really stood out to me in that respect, but also because on these, and this is my one criticism of capitalism that I was telling Robert, they make the TVs so damn good that everything you watch on them now looks fake. Like you can see the set, you know. It looks like in watching a Mexican telenovela. And so that was
that bad?
Oh yeah, especially this one. I mean, the opening scene where there's the Black Union company fighting the Rebs, and they're killing them, and they're saying, "No, we're going to kill every last one of them. No survivors, no prisoners." You know, the total war crime part.
Yeah.
It looked so fake to me. And didn't Spielberg do Saving Private Ryan?
Yep.
Yeah, he did. I believe he did. I believe that was him.
Yeah, I mean, that
Feels
storming the
Spielberg
beach
movie.
at Normandy was so, like, it just seemed like that's what war would be like. You know, it seemed horrific and you know, destruction and pain and misery and all those things. This looked like a bunch of play actors doing a play on a stage, you know, fake punching each other, rubber-tipped bayonets with springs and things like that. I don't know. The production value did not do it for me, and so that sort of tainted the whole thing.
Fair.
Of course, I'm already tainted with Lincoln because I've listened to some DiLorenzo, and I'm not a big fan of this man.
No, I don't blame you. Like, let's keep in mind too. You know, you talked about the war crime opening scene. It that also served as a device to normalize the idea that, like, you know, the moment anybody, like, you know, that first off, the entire Confederacy was about race. Which now I'm a little bit of dissenter in saying that, like, I mean, as far as libertarians go, and saying that there probably was more race stuff going on than we want to admit. In general, I'm not saying you guys specifically. But I mean, with that in mind, still, they made the tone about the South just being about slavery, and that's all that was going on, despite there being a lot of other issues, like the fact that, you know, the federal government had no right to invade them over that issue at all.
Right,
you know,
and
like
no mention of a voluntary association of separate states, separate countries coming together to form a union.
Yep.
I mean, if you voluntarily join, you should also be able to voluntarily secede.
Well, have you guys noticed that because of that this entire happenstance in the Civil War and everything, that, like, the term federalism and anti-federalism have, like, almost lost all meaning? Like, so I'll meet people who talk about being constitutionalists, and they're like, you know, and they'll talk about how they're for states' rights and everything, and about, you know, decentralized powers, and then they'll be like, yeah, I'm a federalist. And like, no, it's not federalism. Federalism is the idea of the Constitution and centralized power and how we're one country, right? Like, you know, that definition has lost meaning for a lot of people.
So many words have gone through that phase, that process.
I'm just kind of sad that one has. So, like, I always have to make the distinction. I'm not a federalist. I'm anti-federalist. For a lot of people, to explain my politics.
One thing I do enjoy is that when this film came out, the Rebs, the secessionists, were of course evil, racist, slave people. But now that Trump has won the election, now California wants to secede, and it's a total like leftist paradise. And now they're the secessionists, you know. And 2 years ago, even a year ago, it was a bad word.
Yeah, but I mean, let's see how long that lasts. I've been already hearing all the jokes about the dam bursting over there and how they need the federal money to fix it.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Like, let's keep that in mind. No, absolutely though. That hypocrisy has been driving me a little bit crazy too. But I mean, you know, I just sit here and encourage them. You guys want to leave? Please do. You want? Yeah, no. Like, if Louisiana wants to leave tomorrow, let them leave too. Like, good Lord, the sooner that all happens, the better for everybody.
Yeah. Well, Woods had an email out a month ago where he was talking about that it seemed as though the country may break up in the near future. That there's enough going on, enough division, which all politics is in my opinion, dividing people. You know, this group is taking advantage of you, so elect me to equalize the playing field for everyone.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's kind of an interesting perspective. Like, I think we live in interesting times, and that's one of the, what is that, an old Chinese proverb? Maybe you always live in interesting times.
Yes, that is true. I don't know about the whole politics thing, to be honest with you. Like, only reason I make that whole distinction, or actually, no, you're right. You're absolutely right in the analysis of it dividing people. I just don't know. So, like, even in you know, in the voluntary idea of the state, right? Like a voluntary society, like, there would have to. I mean, business association. There's political aspects, and that's not me poo-pooing it either. This is just me saying the reality of it. And so, like, I don't always view politics as a bad thing. That's why, like, for example, I worked in 2 political campaigns. I don't mind it. I mind it when they're using government as a means to extort me. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, your dog agrees with you.
Yeah. It's because we opened the front door. I apologize.
No problem. Yeah, maybe I only see politics as being enforced through the barrel of a gun. I'm a little bit with Mao on that, and that's like the only thing I'm with Mao on. We did an episode a little while back about this movie Captain Fantastic where they're all Maoists, and one of the quotes that came up was that all political power comes through the barrel of a gun.
Well, so
you got to enforce whatever laws you put into place. Anything that's market regulated, market law, it's totally voluntary. You can choose to purchase that product, purchase that service. If there's not one that you want, you can find an alternative, or you can start your own. There's no third party preventing you from doing anything or forcing you to do something.
Yeah, no, and I agree with that. Like, if we're talking about actually like state, like governmental politics, that is 100% true. I guess my distinctive point was that in every aspect of society, think about your workplace, right? Like, if you work at a company, there's workplace politics, right? In the sense of manipulate to gain an end, right? You know what I'm trying to say? So, for example,
like currying favor with the boss, that sort of thing.
Yeah, sure, anything like that. Or just trying to get getting people to back up your project, right? There's a political aspect to that. If let's say I want to do a product, like I live in a Mormon community and I'm trying to sell a product that is morally reprehensible to people. That's going to there's a political aspect to that, so I won't get funded. So it's a nonviolent political thing, right? And so it's voluntary, and that's fine, correct? I'm just pointing out that the political nature itself is not necessarily the problem. It's the part where you have that gun existing at all. There we go. That's what I'm trying to get at. I apologize.
Yeah, and perhaps you're right. I think that maybe the workplace politics is a derivative of politics, so it's sort of like it borrowed the term politics.
Sure, I can see that.
So yeah, I'm speaking strictly of the government and the authority version of it.
Yeah, no, and that's fair. And I guess my other point too is I still don't have an issue with people like Justin Amash and others trying to be political to stop, like you said, people basically using the government to beat us up and point the gun at us.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So one thing in the opening where you were describing the film, you said that the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery. Well, of course, the 16th brought it right back, right? That was the one that authorized the income tax.
Right. Yep. Pretty much. May as well. Could have saved them time and just make the 13th Amendment about making whites subject to slavery too.
Well, it's all about equality, fairness, and justice.
Absolutely, all the time, every day. And that was the other thing about the movie too is what did you guys think about Thaddeus Stevens in that movie, Tommy Lee Jones's character?
Yeah, I don't even remember that character, so Daniel's got.
Oh, really?
That one.
Yeah,
so
he's
Thaddeus,
go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, Thaddeus Stevens is the Republican radical who doesn't just want freedom of slavery. He wants equality for slavery, right? Like suffrage, the right to vote, all that good stuff, property ownership, and the ability to be a representative elected by his peers. And he also happened to have, I guess, what would probably have been a mistress who was a former slave, or at least when she was black. And there's this big scene in the movie where they're trying to get this thing to pass in the House of Representatives, right? And the Democrats' big ploy is to bait him into saying what he's already said in the past, right? Which is that he is for not just freeing the slaves, but giving them full rights. And he doesn't, and he just says, "Oh no, just under the law," in reference to being free. So his character is interesting because later on he'll talk about how he wants to confiscate all the land from the South, redistribute it to all the black free people, and allow them to be farmers and basically just use all the money they steal from the South to rebuild. Like, it was crazy.
That's an interesting point, because I think that there's a very subtle difference in, the Democrats wanted to bait him into saying that kind of thing, which, of course, would make it fail, right? Because no one would want to support the confiscation and redistribution. But how you initially presented it, giving them equal rights or that they are equal, well, wouldn't that essentially be, equal under the law? Like, wouldn't that essentially be the same thing?
So, I mean, you have to remember, though, right, is that when they say equal under the law, they think women are equal under the law even though they couldn't vote. Right? So, like, there's a difference at that time anyway. And, if I remember right from the movie, I just watched it this morning, was they were literally just trying to get it so he would admit that he was for full, inclusion of these people into the society. Like, just straight up, for them having all the same rights as white people. Their equality, which is something Lincoln didn't even try to claim, and they didn't even make Lincoln try to claim it in the movie.
Do you think that maybe they were saying that equality under the law is okay, but actually thinking that they are the same stature is a negative? Do you know what I mean? Like they're saying that his personal opinion of them is what's the problem. Treating them the same under the law is fine, because that's what he ended up saying.
Yes. So yes, but you also have to remember that, they were specifically concerned about issues of voting. Like, they mentioned that as something they were trying to get him to say. So, when they called him out right after, I can't remember if it was the younger one who was baiting him or the older one who told him to bait him, told the guy who was baiting him to bait him.
This sounds really, really dirty. Sorry, folks.
My bad. Anyway, no, absolutely. He was saying, we know you said this 1,000 times and you want them to vote. Would you stand to see, black members of this chamber or, Lord forbid women vote? And then, of course, at that, all the people, Republican and Democrats, sent him. So you have to remember, they're reminding us softly that everyone was a sexist too. Just so you know. At least we forget about society back then. So I found it interesting because, they don't shy away from the idea. I don't think they presented Thaddeus as a unrighteous character. They presented him as a very good person. It's just that they also did that while, him and Lincoln both were, advocating for freedom at the end of a gun for these people.
Yeah, I think they're making Thaddeus this total, almost, utopian is not the right word, but this idealist, this hyper idealist.
Yeah.
So they're making him this really great person who had unrealistic goals for the slave question, and then they made Lincoln this deified figure.
Yes.
And they did this in many different ways. They had him pardon the deserters. They had him visit the hospital where the injured soldiers were. They had him doing all these things that made him just this great benevolent person to build up.
Sorry, go ahead.
Including try to stop his son from going to the war, right?
Yeah, that's what I was going to get at, which I found interesting that they chose that when I would argue that would vilify him. For me, from my perspective. Because, he's using his political... literally he says, every other father wish they had this power, but I happen to be the commander-in-chief, so you won't be enlisting. I have the ability to just say no. And I was like, really? We're going to just be that bold-faced about the political corruption going on in this movie? Also, the other thing about Thaddeus, right, is he does make Lincoln look more reasonable, right? Because Lincoln wasn't talking about, confiscating all the land. He wanted to go easy on them, supposedly. Easy on the South.
Right,
yes,
right. By utterly destroying them.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Sherman was under Lincoln's leadership.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. That reminds me of the MLK episode we did with Ryan Jones, where Malcolm X went down to Selma and said, "Hey, I'll be the crazy one so that you'll look more reasonable," Martin Luther King. That sort of reminds me of that dynamic that you just mentioned with Thaddeus and Lincoln.
Absolutely, and I think, and the thing to keep in mind is, on some level, it's true that Thaddeus is more radical than Lincoln. If you go to the history too, Thaddeus wanted to, he condemned the Reconstruction plan they came up with as too benevolent, too nice. So before he died, like it's crazy. Him as a real character, and I just found it how they painted him as such a good person, as such a, you know, non-terrible human being, and yet he's still calling for all of this, you know, military intervention, occupation, and confiscation of wealth. It's interesting, so it purely serves the purpose of making Lincoln look better. In the film, anyway. Guys?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, Daniel, go for it. I'm just, I was taken back by a comment that you guys were talking about in the Senate, and
oh yeah, go for it. What was it? What was going on?
Well, you guys were talking about that they wanted to give, you know, black people the right to vote, where at the time it was just, or women the right to vote, and it was just white male landowners who were able to vote. Is that? I'm not exactly sure on this. So
I was saying that, like, the argument that was used to try to get Thaddeus to look crazier, right? Because the whole thing was that Thaddeus went full crazy, like his full radical views. It was going to kill the amendment in Congress because all these people who were going to vote for it were going to be like, oh, heck no, because that's not what I'm supporting, right? And the argument that was being used by the Democrat to bait him was saying, would you stand to see women voting, and would you stand to see black members in this chamber, right? Like black representatives. So, yeah, they weren't saying that's what they were voting on. They were saying that this is what this guy believes, and this is why you shouldn't vote for it, because he's really for this radical agenda. That make sense?
Right. Yeah, no, it makes sense. You were saying that the movie characterizes these men as like sexists and, you know, whatever.
Oh.
And I would tend to agree with that, but I know that I believe their argument was that, well, only people who have like an invested interest in the country, in land, like I own land, therefore I have a vested interest in how that land is dealt with in terms of the law, has a right to vote. So I think they, you know, by proxy or by consequence they are sexist, but by interest I think they are just being more pragmatic.
I mean, so yes and no. Like, I would definitely agree with that with the framers. I would agree with that argument very heavily with the framers. I just think we're like a generation past the framers at this point. Like, a lot of these guys, I mean, some of them absolutely. Like, I definitely believe there were hardcore, like, Republican, you know, Jeffersonian types, you know, that existed, right? I'm just pointing out that there is definitely, like, I'm not sure how far off the framing of saying how dare we let these people, you know, get these kinds of rights. I do think your argument's sound, though. Like, it is one of those things that's really hard to distinguish because, I mean, I would have to read more on it, and I'll fully admit that. So,
yeah, I don't know if it was necessarily, oh my God, giving women the right to vote, the horror. It was more necessarily giving non-landowners the right to vote. And I don't know if it's the truth or not, but that seems to be the case, is that they were just more interested in, well, these people don't even have an interest, a vested interest in this country, so why would we give them the right to vote?
No, that's true. And I mean, and again, I'm just talking about how the movie portrays it, right? Like, so the movie portrayed it in this fashion, and it was really interesting because, again, it's like showing you the nuances. Like, I mean, there's some legitimacy to this, the nuances of politics, right? Like, you have to make it sound the right way, and you have to make it not political suicide for people. And a lot of what the 13th Amendment had the potential to do, theoretically, was kill a lot of careers. Also, the boldface corruption in the movie was interesting, too, how they just, like, Lincoln straight up authorized the selling of political jobs in exchange for votes for this amendment.
So you think that this movie was a little more nuanced, a little less of a deification of the guy?
No, I think it was definitely deification. No. So, like, I'm a big believer in, like, the idea that just because, like, so it can be totally deifying Lincoln. I just found, like, the political dance going on in the movie interesting.
Okay, so the whole setup of the movie worked for you, because I remember watching it back when the theater came out, and the whole setup of the movie didn't work for me because Spielberg framed the movie in a sense of, is he going to be able to pass the 13th Amendment? How's he going to do it? And so you had to be on board with how it was going to happen, not if it was going to happen, because you knew it was going to happen.
Yes.
So that whole thing was the whole tension of whether or not it was going to happen or not was lost on me.
Yeah.
It's just a baffling choice to make.
No, and I mean, and I was more fascinated by like how it was happening. I'm not saying I was for any of it because again,
right.
like I found the whole selling of political positions, like bureaucratic positions, like rather disgusting, and very, very Clinton-esque, right? Or I guess we could say Lincoln-esque now, right? But I mean, I would also say though, like I mean, the reality is like what's the argument Walter Block makes about how if we have the option to vote for our slave masters, one only beats us once a week and one beats us every day, how we should still vote for the guy who beats us once a week. I mean, understanding how they come to these conclusions, I think, is helpful and important on some level if it's accurate. I just found it interesting.
We brought up that quote several times on the show, and we're like, well, they're promising, but it's a political promise in a campaign, so who knows if they're actually going to do it. I mean, how many political promises get broken? Almost all of them. I think Trump is actually the one example of someone who's actually gone and done most of the things he said he was going to do, which is kind of interesting.
Or at least attempting to.
Yeah, and I'm no fan of the guy. I think he's a monster. But at least he's doing what he said he was going to do.
Yeah, so what's interesting is I don't think he's as bad as a monster. I definitely think he's not Rothbardian. I definitely think he's not libertarian. I definitely don't like the guy from like a personal standpoint. But it is worth pointing out there's been more, with the exception of Jeff Sessions and the fact that he's all of a sudden coming out for civil asset forfeiture, right? I mean, I think there's a lot of positives about Trump that we are not acknowledging a lot of the time. Like I think, just the general, like I mean, think about this. Gorsh, the guy he's picked for Supreme Court, right? I don't think we get anyone near as good if Jeb Bush or Marco Rubio had won the presidency right off of Clinton, because I think any Republican could have beaten Clinton, to be honest with you. Like we probably have ended up with some moderate, and it would have been worse. We certainly wouldn't have Judge Andrew Napolitano getting the chance to talk in the guy's ear. We wouldn't be out of the TPP. We wouldn't have a guy who's looking at repealing federal regulation for the first time in forever, like in a real way. And this is not an endorsement. I didn't vote for him. I wouldn't vote for him. I don't think I'll vote for him for re-election or anything. But I'm just saying, like, there's a lot more good than we give him credit for as libertarians.
Sure. I would agree with all your points, and I would add the whole, as Dave Smith notes, the Trump effect of pointing out the dishonesty of the mainstream media and just how they're just a pack of liars.
Oh, I love that part. No. That part's great.
Oh, no, like, I mean, just for the value of honestly, I was like, this is the best decision for the United States when he gave Alex Jones White House press credentials. I was like, yes, I approve of this presidency at the moment. Right. And then Yemen happened, and then I was like, okay, I disapprove again.
Well, that's where he becomes a monster for me, because he's ahead of this, this Leviathan state, war state, and he's already got dead kids on his hands with drone strikes.
See, I have to, but I always have to ask this question for people. Like, I mean, because I mean, working in the military, it's like I don't know. Listen, guys, like there's a lot of decisions that are made by a lot of people there. A lot of things are just blanket authorized, and I don't know how much of a pause button there is when one president goes out and one comes in. Does that make sense? I totally believe he authorized the Yemen mission. That's not my point. My point is like, let's say for the sake of argument, Ron Paul had won the election back when he ran in 2012, right? And then second day in office, we hear about like a giant drone strike program thing that goes off, kills 100 people or whatever. The gut reaction is to be like, President Paul's responsible for this. Right. The same way we say President Trump is responsible for this. There's a giant chain of command underneath him.
The apparatus is already in motion.
Exactly. Like, I mean, we talk about these federal bureaucracies, like Betsy DeVos is like having to fight her own department right now,
Yeah, but that excludes only the first couple of weeks, right? After that, you've got to assume that he has input on these things. And he hasn't exactly backed down on his war talk.
No. I'm not saying this is a universal example, and I'm not saying this is even specifically defends Trump, because I still think he's bad. I still think he's bad on war, which is something I said from the beginning. I was just merely pointing out, especially in these early months, we kind of got to be a little lenient on how hard we are on him in the sense of, and not saying we shouldn't criticize the war stuff. I'm not saying that. I'm saying how informative it is as him as president, because what will really tell how he is on war is whether or not he starts a new one with Iran, China, or Syria, right? Like, that's kind of the, I mean, like, I hate to be like this, but, like, bigger fish to fry, right? Like, we got to, I mean, like, from his perspective, he's still learning stuff. I mean, I don't think he understood a thing about foreign policy until he got into this position, you know?
He seems to be the guy that has no problem with war. He just wants to execute the wars better.
No, I get that. I'm not debating that. I'm trying to say is that, like, remember, I think the best example of this is the Israel thing, right? He wanted to put, like, the embassy in Jerusalem or something crazy. Like, he wanted to put it, like, right on the West Bank or near the West Bank. It was some crazy, like, he wanted to move it and, you know, basically threatened the entire idea of the two-state solution or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And he quickly backed off that position because he realized when he got there the situation was way hairier than it actually is. I feel like there's a lot of that going on with him. And, you know, also, it's worth pointing out, like, the people whispering in his ear do have an effect on what he's doing, right? Like,
he's full of neocons.
Yeah, like, he has all these Grimer worm tongues whispering into his ear about how he needs to, you know, protect himself and, like, you know, do what's best, but in reality, all he's doing is creating more blowback. So I guess what I'm saying is I'll be interested as Trump becomes more, let's say, self-actualized as a president, you know, more in control of everything. I'll be interested to see where his foreign policy evolves from there. Because right now, he's like, who knows what the neocons are telling him to do, you know?
Yeah, you know, I'd grant you that. I think that there's probably tens of thousands of things he doesn't even know about yet that are still going on and still in motion, because there's this whole bureaucratic apparatus, like we were saying.
Yeah, and that's on all sides, too.
Yeah, and didn't Obama basically blame Bush for everything for, I don't know, the first 6 years of his presidency?
Oh, I know, and I mean, I won't give Trump that. I'll give him, like, you know, 4 months, probably, before I start getting, like, annoyed about it. But, I mean, you know, I definitely blame him for the Yemen thing because I feel like he had to sign off on that. I could be wrong. I mean, that's just my instincts. And no, but I mean, like, I just am saying, like, we have to keep in mind he's not a libertarian. Yes, criticize him for war, right? I want us to stop fighting these wars, but, like,
or his dumb trade policies.
Yeah, or his dumb trade policies.
Yeah, though I think you're right. Getting out of the TPP is probably good. I mean, free trade should be a one-sentence deal, not a 9,000-page document.
Oh, absolutely. And, like, do we really believe it's free trade at that point? Like, you know, like, I haven't read it, but I mean, do we really believe it's a free trade agreement if there's, like, 1 million lines of text? No, that means you have to give legal parameters for things. So I don't buy the TPP thing was a free trade agreement.
Yeah, and it always depends on what the definition of the word is, right? To harken back to Clinton.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, so I mean, there's a lot of that, and I mean, it is, I think it's not too unfair to say that of the last, like, 6 presidents, so far, Trump has been the best of the last 6, easily.
I liked Reagan's rhetoric. His actions were, of course, far different.
Yeah, no, Reagan's rhetoric was great. It was just everything else.
Yeah.
No, and I think Trump's similar. I think, like, some of his rhetoric's good, some of it's bad, but ultimately his actions are a mixed bag as well. So, I mean, I think it's about as good as Reagan at this point.
Yeah. Well, hey, let's swing this back towards the movie Lincoln. You had mentioned that he was going to pull rank with his son and not let him enlist. And I like how that's sort of it precedes John Fogerty being around with his I Ain't No Senator's son, you know, which is about the Vietnam War, and all the senators' sons didn't have to go to fight, but all the poor kids had to.
Mhm. No, absolutely. It's definitely interesting that, like, you know, that song's such a, like, the Vietnam War is such a frowned upon thing, and, you know, political advantage of these children was such a bad thing, and then, like, literally you just acknowledge it in this movie and nobody just bats an eyelash. They're like, yep, you're good, Dad. You know, until he finally gives in and lets his son enlist, and then he has to deal with his crazy wife, and I don't know. It was just really bizarre that they, like, were so willing to paint Lincoln that way. To me,
yeah.
I just thought it was bad. I thought it was, like, a bad way to present him.
Now, I don't know if it's true, but in the film they make him the aide to General Grant. Behind the lines. He's not at the front lines. He's in a very, I want to say,
Posh.
privileged position.
Posh. Yeah. No, it's true. Like, I don't know how they reconcile all this to me. Like, it just seems like so bold-faced, like, corruption. Like, and there's not really much more analytics to go into that, right? Like, you literally used your position as commander-in-chief to move this person from one place to the other out of harm's way. And now you made him an aide to a guy who's going to have a pretty successful political career once this war is over. I mean, you can't know that, but I mean, it stands to reason as like the commander-in-chief under the president, right? That you have a pretty good political position waiting for you when this is all said and over. So it was pretty remarkable to me that they did that and were still able to keep this deification going on.
Now, in the movie, it's been a while since I've seen it, and I don't recall this at all, so you guys can probably correct me on this or not.
Sure.
But the assassination, as I recall, takes place. And does the movie get into any kind of speculation or evidence as to the cause or the motivation behind the assassination? Or
I don't
does it deal
remember,
with
Dan.
it like, this fallen king kind of guy?
Dan, I don't remember very well. I'm forgetting. What did you? Because I think I didn't see all of that because I was rewatching it and I just think I cut it off to go set up my computer. What do you remember about that? Because I'm struggling.
The only thing that I recall is that they said he's taken to the ages now or something like that. His legacy is he's gone now. But I think that because the whole premise of the film is the racism and the anti-slavery stuff, that it's sort of implied, though not overt, that was the reasoning behind it. They don't really get into it. They just say, hey, he's gone now, pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they don't give any kind of legitimate reasons? Like there's never a good reason to kill a president?
I mean, so keep in mind, this is dangerous territory to talk about.
Yes, I agree.
NSA data mining, guys, come on. I think... I'm
saying that Wilkes had his reasons. I mean, yeah, he was probably paid to do it.
Yeah.
But whatever group did it, just like, I mean, the Kennedy assassination, they had a motive. They had an apparatus behind it. I mean, it didn't just happen out of the blue.
Yeah, it wasn't just you just don't think
lone
it was
guy.
As simple as you don't think
angry.
It was as simple as just some disgruntled angry person, which is fair.
Yeah, it's always a lone nut, right? That's I think in a Rothbard lecture he says it's always a lone nut. Why is that?
And then there just happened to be all these people that benefit. Just happened to be.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but in the film they portray when the House is meeting on this thing and they need to get a message from Lincoln real quick, the guys run from the chambers to the White House and just waltz right in. It's sort of like, how did this not happen earlier? Zero security. Yeah, there wasn't, and to keep in mind, I don't think they I think this is a Tom Wood Show episode where they talked about this, but they didn't, or no, this might be Diane Reeves. There wasn't, I think it was McKinney who got assassinated, and then they got the Secret Service, right? The Secret Service didn't exist until 2 more assassinations down the road. Which is crazy.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's insane. The lack of security, the security for the president has, as far as historical terms, is fairly recent, right? Last 100 years.
Yeah, but here he is prosecuting this war against the South. I can't imagine that there really was that lax amount of security around him. If taking the head off the snake would have, ended the war or at least disrupted the Northern Army. I mean, don't you think that they could have gotten somebody up there? I mean, they got the whole delegates up there. They sent the other, like you were saying earlier, the rich conservative down to meet with Jeff Davis and the Confederacy. Mm-hmm. I mean, people were able to travel back and forth. On some level.
I would definitely argue that in this case, obviously, internet, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would definitely argue that if somebody had gotten to Lincoln before the war was over, there was a good chance he could have gotten a peace negotiated with the southern states intact.
Yeah, and that was one of the things in the movie that really bothered me, was that here he is, he's got the delegation from the South coming up to negotiate a peace, and he purposefully delays them.
Oh, yeah.
So I mean, he could have ended the war.
Yep.
Right? And yet, no, I'm going to hold out for this other thing.
And note how many deified.
Yeah, and how many more thousands of people died in that period,
Yeah, no, absolutely. That was one of my big things too. Is like, and this is why I was saying the political aspect's interesting, is because like all of that was a giant dance to get the amendment passed, right? And that is interesting because it shows bare the issues with politics, right? Everyone's being self-motivated, right? Because think about it, the people who are voting against it believe their constituents would not vote them back in. The people who voted for it were either thinking their constituents would vote them back in, or they were getting a job out of it, with the exception of like one or two people who nearly collapsed on the floor when they voted yes.
Right. And you actually just brought up a key point, because these people voting, this was already post-election, but before the new people were coming in. So many of these people had recently been voted out of office, but were still in office until some such time that the newly elected person comes in. So they could still vote on something, even though they were no longer the current elected person. Like there's this overlap period at the time. If I
remember correctly, what was weird about that to me, right, was that it would have been easier to pass that without that election. With that election having come to pass with all the seat changes, because they still had a majority and they were going to have a bigger majority, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong, but I
think he alluded to that. He said, or one of the guys in his cabinet was saying,
Secretary of State. It was
just wait for the new session and this will pass easily.
And he's like, no. And if I remember right, his timing, his reasons for the timing was he needed a way to maintain the Union, right? Keep the Union together, abolish slavery, which is like his whole propaganda piece for the war, by the way, was slavery. And then still incorporate the Southern states so they could vote, at least ratify them, right? He wouldn't be able to get them to vote representatively, right? So if Arkansas's representatives and everybody else's representatives were there, it would not have passed. He wouldn't get 2/3 majority in the House, I believe was his reasoning. And if he had waited for the war, because they thought they were winning the war, right? And his version of winning the war is making sure they're reintegrated into the United States. They get representatives back. All of a sudden, they don't have the ability to pass it.
Right.
So
sneaky and sly for sure.
Yeah, no, exactly.
A lot of people died needlessly.
No, it's true, and the reason that's interesting too is because it really reveals just how focused. That was the bit that revealed how much of a unionist Lincoln was. Right, he has to literally push a vote that should not work through the House so he can win his war and take them back, as opposed to just let them secede.
Right.
Which is why the analytics of the movie is interesting to me. It's not because I agree with any of it. It's because it reveals a lot about strategy, human nature, and other things.
Yeah. So we should probably start winding this one down. You've been a really excellent guest. You want to give us your final rundown on your thoughts on the film?
Yeah, I felt like the movie was, as far as if you just soullessly take away the political virtue signaling in the film, it's an entertaining movie that's fun to watch. Once you take into consideration the inaccuracies, it becomes a lot less, which is a shame because Daniel Day-Lewis did do a good job. I felt like overall the thing that the movie did was it deified Lincoln while glorifying his flaws. Right? They made him out to be a dictator. They made him out to be this guy who was a virtuous authoritarian, which actually alludes to episode 11 of the Tom Woods Show, where it was the first time Tom took on the whole Lincoln myth, and he talks about the reason everyone loves Lincoln is because it helps authorize the government we have today. I definitely felt that film definitely played that role, and it authorized the government we have today in the way of, saying that, all like going over using executive power is the way to achieve social equality and freedom.
Right.
So that was my main thoughts on the film, to be honest.
So Robert, in your creaky old man memory from seeing this like 2-3 years ago,
when did this movie come out?
2012.
Okay, so I haven't seen it in 5 years. Yeah, I just remember being impressed with Lewis's performance. This was at the time when I was becoming an ANCAP libertarian. I still had a lot of questions, so I wasn't in love with. I've never been in love with the government, although I was a lefty person growing up. I've never loved war, so I objected to a lot of things in this movie, but the main one at the time, just from an entertainment perspective, was I wasn't necessarily on board and interested in how he had gotten the amendment passed, although the points you've been raising have made me more interested in it than I was at the time. It just seemed more like a mystery movie, as in like how is he going to get this done, as opposed to if he gets it done. Whereas at the time, I thought it was more of a, is he going to do it? Is he going to be able to get it passed? And since you knew he got it passed, it kind of defeated the whole purpose of the movie for me at the time. But I don't know, listening to you guys talk about it has made it a lot more interesting to me, although I would say that any movie that glorifies and deifies government isn't one I can get behind.
Oh, yeah. Agreed.
Yeah. So, Daniel, what are your thoughts on this film? Just passing thoughts here.
Well, I'll stick by my telenovela status. I felt like the production, maybe it was because capitalism made my TV too good, and I could tell that it was a set and a lot of CGI, and I couldn't hear the film very well, so I was reading text on the screen. But I knew going into it that I wasn't going to like the film, so maybe that poisoned the well a little bit. I was sort of dreading watching this movie, but I knew that we had to do one for President's Day, and why not this one? Though I'm sure that the Abraham Lincoln Vampire Slayer one was probably a better film.
Actually, I've seen that movie. It's not bad. It's not bad.
For the social like science level, probably feels better, I'm sure.
Definitely.
Yeah, so maybe I will watch that one, just so I actually do have a contrast to have. But it's a little bit of a throwaway line there, but I think that one probably is a better film. Which is weird because Spielberg is like this, great filmmaker, right? He's one of the giants, and maybe he needs to stick with doing aliens in the front basket of a bicycle, or get Harrison Ford to come back and do another Indiana Jones or something. I don't know.
No, we've had too much. Sorry, I can't forgive him for Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I just can't.
No, I can't either. That thing was a shit show for sure.
Shia LaBeouf was the best performance, and that's sad.
Oh man, he's gone totally crazy lately.
Oh, I know. Just when I thought you brought it back, nope, crazy again.
Yeah, is he still in front of that wall saying he will not divide us? Is that his thing?
I guess. I don't know, man. He should just wear a mask with all the other Antifa, so I don't have to know.
Yeah, I know he got arrested because he was assaulting people, right? Like,
I love how the only person who this is hilarious. The only person that can get arrested for being an Antifa is a celebrity, right? But none of the Antifas can actually get arrested. What? Just saying, it's weird.
Yeah, there's that one woman who was on Tucker Carlson, and she's been interviewed on local news shows as well, where she's basically there's video of her physically assaulting people. She admits to it. She's instigating it more, and she's a middle school teacher.
Kindergarten teacher is what I had heard.
Oh, kindergarten.
I thought I've heard different reports. It's fine. I don't know for sure, but I know she's a teacher, and that's still terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are the people that are educating our youth. And a lot of these professors have come out and condoned a lot of the violence. It's really disturbing.
It's terrible, and I mean, this is going to sound like anti-Rothbardian for a second, but I swear, all I'm hearing is them giving authorization for me to, respond in kind, so, I mean, hey, man, I'm peaceful, but if you're going to be like this, I know the force is coming against me, so why would I hold back,
Yeah, it's like the left has all adopted the Bush doctrine, the preemptive strike.
Exactly.
And,
if that's the case, libertarians, be ready.
Yeah, I mean, the good thing that the left is so anti-gun, right?
Yeah, right. We have a good unfair advantage in our favor. I like it.
Yeah. So hey, before we wrap up, I want to give you assholes a pop quiz.
Oh gosh.
All right. It's a really easy one.
It's super easy. There's like 15 questions. I'll just read a few.
Oh, I know this quiz. Go ahead.
All right. What president raised a huge army at his own will without the approval of Congress?
Seems hard. I don't know. How would you take this one? No, I'm joking. Go ahead. Read them.
Yeah, I'll just keep going through the question. It's all the same answer.
No, I know.
What president started a war of choice in violation of every principle of Christian just war teaching? What president said he had to violate the Constitution in order to save it? Sounds vaguely familiar with George Bush and violating capitalism to save it. Yeah. Is that still part of Tom Wood's opening?
Back in the day it was, not now.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, Tom, I don't listen as much as I should.
That's an old.
Which president declared elected legislatures of 13 states to be combinations of criminals that he had to suppress? Which president said he was indifferent to slavery but would use any force necessary to collect taxes? Who sent combat troops from the battlefield to bombard and occupy New York City? Who sent the army to arrest in the middle of the night thousands of private citizens for expressing their opinions and held them incommunicado in military prisons with total denial of due process of law, and had soldiers destroy newspaper manufacturing plants? And it goes on and on. I will post this in the show notes, but there's another 10 or 15 questions. But the answer, of course, is our guest, Rex. Who's the answer?
Abraham Lincoln.
That's right. He is, this pop quiz really, I think, is a good red pill for people if they ever run across it and be like, holy crap, he was actually doing some very awful stuff.
I'm just going to post the quiz one day and just leave the answer off and just see if people Google it.
Yeah,
that's probably the best way to do it.
Yeah, that's a fair question. We'll post it below. It'll be pretty obvious because the title of our show is about Lincoln, but
absolutely.
But anyway, Rex, thank you so much for coming on. We do look forward to having you be a contributing author for us at actualanarchy.com. And when you do get your site up and running, we will pimp the hell out of it.
Awesome. I appreciate it, guys.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks, man, for coming on. It's been nice. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I know. I enjoyed it.
All right, well, that has been our President's Day special for the Actual Anarchy podcast. We did the movie Lincoln, if, you just listened to the very end of the show. And click on any of the Amazon links at actualanarchy.com or readrothbard.com. Support us at patreon.com/readrothbard or click on TipJar at readrothbard.com. There's so many different ways to support us, even if it's just comments or likes or shares or iTunes subscriptions or reviews or ratings. Pretty much anything gives us a reason to get out of bed in the morning and keep doing what we're doing. So we thank you guys for joining us for this episode, and look for more coming from us in the coming weeks where we talk about movies from a Rothbardian Anarcho-Capitalist perspective. And this is Daniel signing out. Robert, the last word.
That's right. Have a good day, Freedom Nerds. President's Day, we did it, but hopefully we won't always be doing one of these. Take care, everybody. The Chipmunks. CHIPMUNK. We're the Chipmunks. Guaranteed to brighten your day. Do 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 do.